Superman who would take humanity to new heights, to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.
Greetings, everybody. It's Armor of Truth Live number 319. Olympic-sized lies. Trans occultism, climate disaster programming in Paris 2024. Of course, we're talking about the Paris Olympic Games coming up next month. Before we dive into the Olympics today, let me give you a little rundown of what you could look forward to today. We're going to start off with a story that some of you, two stories actually, that you may have heard recently, where a man won the Miss Maryland pageant, and also a plus size lady won Miss Alabama, or at least that's how it's reported. Was that true? What's actually going on there? And that's going to lead us into our Olympics topic for today. Transgender athletes have been barred from competition. What's up with that? Also, they're not allowing any air conditioning in the rooms, the athletes' rooms at the Olympic Village. They always build dorms, and for the standard Olympic athletes, for the ones who aren't already millionaires, professional athletes, that's where they stay. The ones who can afford it will stay at the Ritz. But anyway, and also, so that's going to lead us into talking about the mayor of Paris, who is an obvious communist. You see that lady on the thumbnail. That is Anne Hidalgo. She's quite a character. And this leads us right back into the idea of consensus science or groupthink. So let's dive right into this. Let's start here with this. You've probably seen this story somewhere out there, right? Miss Alabama. I'm here to tell you, that's fake news. That is not Miss Alabama. Now, for different reasons, both of these stories, Miss Alabama and, of course, the other story here, which is Miss Maryland. That ain't no lady. Anyway, for different reasons, both of these stories are false and represent the near psychosis Americans have fallen into as a result of engaging in this hyper-real in the hyper-real, right? We live in screens. We're engaging with things that are not real most of the time. There might be representations of something real or someone who's real, but after a while, you get so used to that kind of interaction that you forget. You become so separated from the reality that it almost doesn't matter anymore. The hyper-real is more real than real. This is the real world because this is where I am all the time. So we've engaged in the hyper-real so much that things like this are happening. It's not the total explanation, but we'll get to more of that later today also. But the nation, the world, has lost its ability to anchor to reality, exchanging the truth for a copy of a copy of a copy that has become so degraded that any representation of the idea of truth is accepted as if it were reality. You can see how confusing that is. That's how hard it is for people to actually know what's real these days. So let's just start off with this story here. This is Sarah Millican. Sarah Millican is her name. Now the story was, this is a couple weeks ago. Sarah Millican worked for 8 years the article says, to win the Miss National America Alabama title. Finally, in 2024, she was crowned in May after 3 attempts. Other reports say she had tried for 8 years to win the title, so who knows. Either way, her story went viral after she was interviewed by WKRG. That's not WKRP. Pretty close, but this is not Les Nessman. WKRG in Mobile, Alabama, referred to her erroneously as Miss Alabama. And far be it from the media to double check a fact, that's when things got crazy, almost like it was a publicity stunt, perhaps on behalf of the NAM. Well, I don't have any evidence to support that claim, but had you ever heard of, I've already forgot what it's called, the National America Miss pageant? Not before this, you hadn't, probably. Once the story was posted to the station's website, YouTube, and social media, commenters instantly began pointing out the obvious. Right? The obvious thing here, right? Because this is because wherever you saw the headline, you saw Miss America or Miss Alabama and this lady. Obviously, Miss Milliken is obese. And typically, beauty pageants are neither won nor even fielded by those who are obese. Now, I don't care for pageants. I think the concept is superficial. It's creepy. It's unhealthy, even for those who are not obese, right? But that said, pointing out that the woman is severely overweight to the point that she looks to be in danger is not hate speech. According to the World Health Organization, obesity has doubled worldwide since the 1990s. And that hasn't been helped by the quote-unquote big and beautiful campaigns which encourage young girls and women to stay obese or to become more obese. It's a real thing out there. In 2017, around 4.7 million people died of obesity. Obesity is a chronic condition that causes other chronic diseases and impacts quality of life severely. So here's a little clip. You know, there's the whole body positive movement, right? So whatever you are is cool, is okay. You know, you be you. Whatever you might be.
Just because I'm fat, that doesn't invalidate the things that I say.
She died.
You ready to get supersized?
She died too.
Today I've got the big Fruit Loop.
He's dead.
Fat positive influencers are dying. So we all know the fat acceptance movement at this point.
I sadly did not get a McChicken today. I was feeling like a burger girl.
Here's one of the fat positive influencers named Brittany, who promoted fat positivity on TikTok. And this was one of the last videos she posted before she died, where she pretty much regretted everything. Here's the caption: I wish I could turn back time and have not stopped when it got hard, not given up when the grief hit me. That's life though. This has to be the final time I pick myself up off the ground because I'm scared I'm gonna end up in a very bad place that my body can't recover from.
A week after Milliken appeared on WKRG, the station did another story about her. And this story was about cyberbullying. So there's a lot of opportunity, right? This young lady was used. I mean, she put herself in this position to be in this pageant, but then she was used in many ways. I believe that this National American Miss pageant probably fomented this somehow. You know, this, I don't know. They didn't jump out quickly to say, no, wait, you've got the title wrong. She's not Miss Alabama. That's a different thing. But anyway, so she was used, and she was in a position to catch quite a bit of flack. It became their number one story instantly. Right? And it's because they called her Miss Alabama. Had they called her by her title, probably no one would have paid attention. Miss Alabama is not her title. For days and days, WKRG repeated this story and using it different ways. Someone on Facebook commented, "Your credibility as a professional news agency is coming into question." Yeah, of course. National outlets quickly jumped on the bandwagon, not checking any of the facts, continuing to call Milliken Miss Alabama. Now, the truth about this, the reason we're talking about this is, it might seem silly to you, but this is an example of a hyper-reality where who knows what's real anymore. But the truth is there is only one Miss Alabama title, and that is for the pageant that sends the winner to Miss America. Honestly, I had to do this research, so if you could donate to us and help us out for having to trudge through that muck, we'd appreciate it. That would be helpful. Anyway, there's also there's Miss America, and there's also Miss Alabama USA, which sends contestants to the Miss USA pageant. So there's Miss America and Miss USA. She was neither of these, but the story still ran. They're different pageants, different franchises. Former actual Mrs. Alabama, where did she go? She's right here somewhere. There she is. Actual former Miss Alabama. This is Amy Beth Shaver said, "Miss America owns the rights to Miss Alabama, the title, so it's improper. Could even be a copyright infringement to use that title for another pageant or for another person." She said, quote, "If you're a pageant person, you're only going to participate in either Miss America or Miss USA. This National American Miss, nobody knows what it is. Nobody's heard of it," she said. "I don't even know what it is." And she's in that little world. The National American Miss website says, now here's probably what's closer to the truth. The NAM website says that National American Miss, the pageant, the franchise, there's one for juniors and youth, and it awards winners with scholarships, self-care products, and other prizes. And they say the program is based on a positive self-image. There's the website, if you care about it. That's what it says on the website. Now, in response to this massive attention, the NAM put up a post on Twitter saying, "For decades, National American Miss has proudly celebrated all young women. This year in Alabama, Sarah captivated the selection panel with her clear communication, poise on stage, and extensive community service." They didn't say her beauty. They said she had a nice personality, didn't they? Her message of body positivity and emphasis on never giving up on your goals is inspiring. It says here, pageants are not all the same. NAM is a pageant that encourages young women to live life without limits. That's terrible advice. No limits. And clearly, it looks like they've convinced this young lady that, and that's how she's going to live, with no limits. It's terrible advice. Milliken responded to some of the comments about her weight. She said, "The thing some people were saying was truly disgusting. I feel oftentimes people resort to cyberbullying because it doesn't feel real," right? You're just talking to people on a screen, right? She's saying that it's victims of. She goes on to say that victims of cyberbullying are twice as likely to engage in self-harm. Well, we don't really know what she means or other people mean when they refer to bullying these days. So, disclaimer, mistreating someone, using intimidation, or physically attacking someone is sinful and it's abhorrent behavior. And we ought never to condone or celebrate that kind of behavior. But in our super woke, overly sensitive culture, this broad concept of bullying, where a person can accuse anyone of bullying if they believe a comment or a meme, made them feel even the slightest bit uncomfortable, that is a very bad sign of a culture in decline. By the way, in case you were wondering, if you're curious, this is the real Miss Alabama. That's actually Miss Alabama. So if for those of you who are disconcerted by the fact, oh wow, this is Miss Alabama, well, maybe this will put things back into some order for you. I don't know. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But it gets worse, folks. That story is nothing Here's where it starts to get creepy. This is Bailey Ann Kennedy. I can't say it. The wife of a Marine who was crowned the first ever transgender Miss Maryland USA. And now, I'm not going to play the game. And now he will compete in the Miss USA pageant in Los Angeles. What is today? The 24th? In less than 2 weeks. On August 4th in Louisiana. In Los Angeles. She'll be... see what I did? See how the culture affects us? He will be competing at Miss USA in August. So, here's what's interesting too. The Miss Universe organization who runs the Miss USA pageant made 2 changes recently. They got rid of the age limit, which used to be 28. If you notice, the title is Miss. It's Miss Maryland. It's Miss USA. That's MISS. That means unmarried. You know, it means young lady, female. Well, they did 2 things. They got rid of the age limit, and they got rid of the restriction to only unmarried. Is it a coincidence that this man won a pageant for women during Pride Month? Well, maybe, maybe not, but the effect is certainly there. In addition to being the first transgender Miss Maryland USA, Kennedy is the first Asian American winner. Do you see what we're doing here, right? How many different ways can we identify this person as different from white? How many different ways is this person not white? And not male, and not straight, and not Christian, and not American. In fact, they do call it Asian American. But anyway, you get the point. We talked about this recently in our article, our Substack article, Globalism is Gay. That's not meant to be funny. That's a fact. If you haven't seen this article yet, go ahead and check it out. We show you make the argument here. Totalitarian ideology is anti-white, anti-straight, anti-American, and most certainly, it is anti-Christian. So, how many different ways can you be not white in America? The more ways you can be not white, the more status you attain. Well, it's prestige, isn't it, right? Prestige is something that looks important. It looks a certain way, but it's like a billboard, right? It's glossy, bright colors on the front, but when you look around back, it's like cobwebs and there's nothing there. Well, the first time a man, also, wait a minute, I missed this point. He's also a military spouse, so that's another first, right? And how many firsts can we have? See, the thing today is the first of this, the first that, the first one to be. Where does that stop? I think that gets kind of dangerous, doesn't it? Well, the first time a man, in the article it said the first time a trans woman, but I'm not playing the game. The first time a man openly competed at a Miss USA event was in 2018 when Miss Nevada USA was represented by a person using the name Cataluna Enriquez. I'm not going to show those pictures. Have you not had enough? Well, Kennedy here says that he hopes his milestone will open up some doors, open up some hearts for people to see that there are many aspects of the LGBT community out there. And I hope I can be a positive contribution to society and making a difference. Right? That's what's important, making a difference. What kind of difference are we making? Doesn't matter. Just make a difference. Kennedy said he was inspired by the sisterhood of other competitors he saw on the pageant circuit. He also said, it's been a whirlwind because I knew this was bigger than me. I knew it was going to mean a lot for all the LGBTQ kids out there who might feel like they don't belong, like I did growing up. They said. She said. Yeah, see, he said. It's tough, isn't it? It's tough in this culture. Wow. Well, after winning Miss Maryland, USA, Kennedy claimed, quote, "Not everyone has to agree with the spaces you occupy, and it doesn't mean that you aren't worthy of these opportunities." Let's think about that for a minute. Does that make any sense at all to you? Not everyone has to agree with the spaces you occupy. Okay, right now I occupy this space. No one can doubt that. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that you aren't worthy of these opportunities. Yeah, it really does. I mean, you're not worthy to hang out in the dressing room with women. Well, Twitter was a... Oh, by the way, yeah, here you go. Here's the picture. This is the happy couple, recently married. I think they maybe have been married for a couple years now. Anyway, this is Marine. Got his name here somewhere. Let's see. It's in here somewhere. Yeah, there we go. How about that? You see what's happening here, don't you? All right, let's get 2 dogs. Let's get our Christmas picture. Let's make this look as white bread as we possibly can. In our efforts to be as non-white as possible, let's make sure that we do everything that the wasps did. Because that represents power. That represents privilege. See how confusing all this is? In their quest for identity, they're just completely obfuscating and losing themselves. Yeah, I mean, there's more of it. Now, again, I don't care. Don't care very much about pageants and all, but there were a lot of young unmarried girls, women, who probably have worked a long time, maybe aspired to this all their lives, and to lose that opportunity because a male jumped in front of you. All right, let's get out of this. This is weird. And of course, people will accuse us here of there is no grooming going on. It's not real. It's not happening. By the way, if we're going to smash the patriarchy, Taylor Swift, right? She's the model for America's young women. A lot of young Christian women look up to Taylor Swift. I don't know. Is that a good idea? Well, I'm going to play it again, but you might have heard it. You might not have heard it. She just F the patriarchy. That's her big message to all the young girls at her concert this day. Do we remember this? Here's Fallon Fox. That's a man who said, hey, I feel like a woman, so I'm going to go fight in the ladies division, MMA. Fractured this biological woman's skull. And is celebrated for doing it, right? That's the patriarchy. That's the patriarchy. Wow. Is that annoying or what? Okay, let's move on to the Olympics. The 2024 Summer Olympics will be held in Gay Paris this year. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. So, in Paris from July 26th to August 11th. So about a month from now, they'll get started. The Games will celebrate the centenary, or you'd call it, it's been 100 years since they were held in Paris the last time in 1924. over 10,000 athletes participate in what we now call the Summer Olympics, coming in from about 200 different countries, 329 events, 32 different sports. Now, just like everything else, if the Olympics were ever worthy, they have certainly jumped the shark. This year, the games will feature new sports like breakdancing. Okay? Are you with me? The Paris Olympics are committed this year to sustainability all day long. So, they aim to be the most environmentally friendly games ever, focusing on reducing carbon emissions. In fact, the mayor said she wants to reduce the carbon footprint of the Paris Games to half of what the carbon footprint was in London and Rio. How do you really measure that? How do you actually measure that? Now, the big story, though, that's coming out is they have actually, common sense prevailed this week. As an organization called, let's see, what are they called? Well, the governing body over swimming, the world governing body. I'll get to it. So, what the way the articles read, that transgender athletes faced increased restrictions ahead of the Paris 2024 Olympics compared to previous rules. It was recently decided that someone who identifies as transgender must have completed their transition. Let's just be serious. This is really about men wanting to compete in women's sports. We don't really have this problem with women trying to compete in men's sports. We don't see any women, trying to break down the barriers to run in the 100-meter dash with Usain Bolt. They're not doing that. Well, so it's really only one way. So it's about advantage. It's not about identity. It's about prestige. So once again, what they ruled was that you have to have completed your transition before the age of 12. There's some other technical term that they call it. It's either the age of 12 or before puberty actually began. Now, I don't know how they measure that, but they have some way of measuring that, apparently. Who knows? They say they do. Who am I to question? Well, if they haven't completed the transition before then and maintained their testosterone level at, 1.2 nanomoles per liter ever since then, well, then they can't participate. It's very interesting. The trouble for real women in swimming began, though, when this person here, this person who's posing as a character called Leah Thomas. This is actually William Thomas. I'm sorry for that right there, but it's, I don't show that to be lewd. I'm just showing that because what's happening? And I almost did it. And he's mad. And he's mad because he can't compete against the women in the Olympics. I think they should let him do it because he's going to get trounced at the Olympics. He's not going to roll through it like he did in the NCAAs. Anyway, well, this person swam for the University of Pennsylvania. Let me get that off of there. That's probably not very good, is it? This is the document actually from the governing body of World Aquatics Commission or whatever is what they are. Let me just read the story here. So what happened here really? This is a person who has done a social transition, hasn't changed anything but his name. I think maybe it had some shaving on the Adam's apple, something, but still a fully intact male, right? Need we say any more? Now, in the NCAA, in all its vast wisdom, went along with the pretense that he was a woman. He claimed he started feeling like a woman in high school. So they let him compete as a woman against other women who also, once again, had worked all their careers to get to this point, in this sport and in the championships. But that's one side of it, okay? That's one side of it. Here is the far darker side of it. He also had access to women's locker rooms, which not only forced the women to undress in front of him, but also permitted this 6'4" man to flash his private parts at the shocked and frightened women. Well, of course, Thomas became a champion. Not really, but in title. Winning the NCAA's Division I 500-yard freestyle swimming championship in 2022. Last year, in 2023, the World Aquatics Authorities passed a rule, which I've just gave you, that transgender women, actually men, can't compete against women unless they had male puberty suppressed before age 12 and maintain their testosterone levels below 2.5 nanomoles per liter. Sorry, I got it wrong. What an insane statistic to have to keep up with, right? Now, William Thomas appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, the CAS. That's this body here, the CAS. And it ruled that Thomas lacked standing to challenge swimming officialdom's rules, and rightly, they dismissed his complaint, as you can see here. The request for arbitration filed on September 6, 2023, they still continued to refer to him as Ms. But the request for arbitration was dismissed. All other motions or prayers for relief are dismissed. They heard nothing of it. But it's just a matter of time, right? Right, because this is going to get them angry. The Associated Press reported that Thomas called the CAS decision deeply disappointing. Thomas said, quote, "Blanket bans preventing trans men from competing are discriminatory and deprive us of valuable athletic opportunities that are central to our identities. And now, trans women everywhere must fight for our dignity and human rights." What about the rights of all the other people that you're stepping on, trampling as you seek out your true self? Here's another point here I thought you might find interesting. Founder of something called Athlete Ally. There's the term ally. You have to watch out for that term. Today, ally doesn't mean a friend or something. It means specifically a friend of the LGBTQ community. Athlete Ally founder and executive director Hudson Taylor said it's a sad day for sports and for anyone who believes that trans athletes should have the opportunity for their experiences of discrimination to be heard and adjudicated like everyone else. I don't know, but it seems an awful lot like that's exactly what happened here. Right? His appeal for, how was it he said here? Anyone who believes that trans athletes should have their opportunity for their experiences of discrimination to be heard. All right, so Thomas felt discriminated against, filed a complaint, was heard, it was deliberated on, and a decision was made. They did have their opportunity to have their experience of discrimination heard and adjudicated like everyone else. But that's not really the point, right? We have to get exactly what we ask for. The Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, this group, one of their leaders, Kate Ellis, said, "World Aquatics continues to spread disinformation. Transgender women are women, and all athletes who want to play and follow the rules should have a chance to do so." They do have a chance. get in your division and qualify like everyone else. Well, the backlash to all of this has begun. I'll tell you what, I won't read. Well, here's Babylon B. Let's just read it. Babylon B, a little joke here. Disqualified Leah Thomas asks if he can still just hang out in the locker room naked. Because honestly, look, that now you might think I'm just being a little too harsh. I mean, listen to what Riley Gaines said about this experience.
What mattered to the NCAA were the feelings of a biological male. In 1972, Congress enacted Title IX to end unjust sex discrimination in all aspects of education, including college athletics. But by allowing Thomas to displace female athletes in the pool and on the podium, the NCAA intentionally and explicitly discriminated on the basis of sex. Although the NCAA claimed it acted in the name of inclusion, its policies in fact excluded female athletes. But that is not all. In addition to being forced to give up our awards, our titles, and our opportunities, the NCAA forced female swimmers to share a locker room with Thomas, a 6'4", 22-year-old male who was fully intact with male genitalia. Let me be clear. We were not forewarned. We were not asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent. If nothing else, I hope you can truly see how this is a violation of our privacy and how some of us have felt uncomfortable, awkward, embarrassed, and even traumatized by this experience.
No doubt. Well, there's a backlash. It's begun and it's growing fast. The only question is, will it sustain? In Australia, this past March, Australia's Flying Bats soccer team slaughtered the Macquarie Dragons 4-0. 4-0, I should say. If you're a soccer pogue, you have to say 4-0. To win the coveted Beryl Ackroyd Cup and its $1,000 prize. Well, the reason? Well, the Bats fielded 5 trans women. That means they fielded 5 males on their team. But the Bats didn't win just that game. They won every game they played during that 4-week tournament. The Daily Mail reported that parents were so angry at this that they pulled their daughters out of the matches. They didn't know that their daughters were going to be playing against young men. In fact, one of the Bats players, a male, broke the leg of a St. Patrick's, one of the team's St. Patrick's players, female. So a male player from the Bats team broke one of the female opponent's leg. Broke it in 2 places. It was a brutal hit and injury that ended her athletic career. Why is it allowed? Inclusion. Living my best life now. Identity. Well, it's everywhere. Men who pretend they're women are dominating women's cycling, weightlifting, track and field. Of course, now also women's arm wrestling is another target, and darts. They can have those. But look, seriously, there are people who enjoy that, and they have an organization, and they want it taken seriously, and they don't want this nonsense. So I mean, they have that right, and they shouldn't be. What Riley Gaines just explained here is it's depraved. It's terrible. One last time. All right, let's get into the Olympics now. Let's talk about the origins and the worshipful purpose of the Olympic Games. Let's see, we'll come to those points in just a minute. There we go. Let's start with these guys. The origins of the Olympic Games can be traced back to ancient Greece, specifically to the city of Olympia in the 8th century BC. These early games were held in honor of Zeus, who was the highest of the Greek god. He was the most high of the Greek pantheon of gods. The first recorded Olympic Games took place in the year 776 BC, and they quickly became a central part of Greek culture. that were held every 4 years. Athletes from various Greek city-states would compete in events like running, wrestling, boxing, and chariot racing. So the ancient Olympics weren't just a sporting event. It was very much a religious festival, including sacrifices and rituals dedicated to Zeus. The athletes competed naked, celebrating the human body and its capabilities. The victors were crowned with olive wreaths and hailed as heroes upon their return home. The games fostered a sense of Greek identity, a sense of nationalism and unity, even amidst frequent conflicts among city-states. Now, Olympia, the reason the city-state of Olympia was used because it was a sanctuary site. It was a sacred place, home to numerous temples, including the massive Temple of Zeus. Now, the games would begin with religious ceremonies, including the lighting of the Olympic flame, which was ignited by the sun's rays at the altar of Hera, and it burned throughout the duration of the games. This tradition, the flame, right, the relay of the flame and the lighting of the flame at the event, symbolizes Zeus's divine presence and approval. Sacrifices, you say? Yes, animal sacrifices, particularly oxen, were made to Zeus. Athletes also offered sacrifices, gifts, votive gifts, prayers for victory, maybe pinches of incense. I'm not sure about the Greek culture. That was Roman, but anyway, they were seeking divine favor. During the games, a truce would be declared for any warring city-states. And during this time, conflicts and wars were paused to allow for safe passage for athletes and spectators back and forth, and also to allow for the safe worship of the deity. Competitions were viewed as acts of worship, with athletes striving to honor the gods through their physical prowess. The victors were seen as the ones who were favored by the gods and were often celebrated with hero cults back in their home cities. It's not much different today, is it? When you think Cleveland and sports today, you think LeBron James. He's a big hero there. Athletes competed, again, naked. And ostensibly this was to celebrate the human form, the many achievements made possible by the work of the human body, which is a concept rooted in Greek paganism's emphasis on physical perfection and human potential. Many events and traditions in the games were linked directly to Greek mythology. For example, the foot race, which is the oldest event, was believed to have been instituted by Hercules, a demigod and hero in Greek mythology. The games also continued a sense of Greek identity and unity again among the city-states. But more specifically, a sense of identity and unity that transcended political divisions, that transcended religious and cultural practices. So this was a religious festival that was meant to transcend all other religious festivals. So as it turns out, the ancient Olympic Games continued for nearly 12 centuries until they were banned in the year 393 CE by the Roman Emperor Theodosius I, who sought to promote Christianity and to suppress pagan practices. And so the games lay dormant for over 1,000 years, surviving only in the historical records and legends. In 1896, the Frenchman Pierre de Coubertin revived the Olympic Games. with its religious and pagan symbolism, keeping all that intact and adapting it to a more secular and inclusive global context. Let's see here. For example, we'll let this roll here. Just let that roll here because this is a retrospective of the opening ceremonies through the years. So the rituals of lighting the flame and the torch relay, connect the ancient and modern games. So that's a new symbolism. The flame, again, symbolizes purity, symbolizes the pursuit of perfection and the continuity of the spirit of the games, which is a religious festival above all religious festivals. Athletes and officials take oaths to uphold specific values reflecting a secular form of spiritual commitment. Echoing the ancient truce, the modern Olympics ostensibly promote peace and unity among nations, and they serve clearly as a platform for propaganda today or international understanding and cooperation. That's what the Olympic rings ostensibly represent. Well, modern opening and closing ceremonies are rich in pagan and occult symbolism. I mean, with every games, it has gone further and further, more and more over the line. They incorporate elements of the host nation's culture, blending traditional and contemporary motifs, and plenty of occult symbolism. The rituals create a shared experience that transcends individual religious beliefs. In other words, a one world unity, a one world religion is the idea. The idea is to leave behind all of your ways and come here with us so we can celebrate the new one way, oneness. So it's a form of secular spirituality, pursuit of excellence, celebration of, again, human potential, but of course, a collective sense of purpose and meaning. Now, of course, as we said, in recent years, the Olympic Games have become overtly ritualistic. Let's see. There you go. Very specifically nodding toward occultism. So it's not just paganism, but we're certainly paganism, but Western esotericism has become a part of it now. Also, the Malthusian death cult of climate fear and population reduction, they have used the games as a platform to force feed their twisted worldview to all corners of the world. The commercialization and politicization of the games has marred what was considered to be the original purpose of sport and the celebration of humanity. Moving into the 20th century. Now this one was very weird. If you remember the 2012 games in London, 2012, right? 8 years before 2020. Let me just not say the words. We all know what happened in 2020. And the symbolism in the, I guess this is the opening ceremony. I think it is. Right? I mean, you can see this, right? The doctors, the nurses. Right? So, they were given a nod to the NHS. I get it, but why? Why? I mean, this video was broken down by many people. Many people did a lot of people did a really good job breaking it down. Look, it's also interesting too, isn't it? Do you see the bleachers, the seats? Don't they look empty? Yeah, empty stadiums were a common feature of 2020 and 2021. Especially the Olympic Games in 2020 were postponed, held in 2021 in Japan with no spectators. A lot of things about this were just a little over the top as far as if you want to call it predictive programming. French educator Baron Pierre de Coubertin, once again, spearheaded the modern revival of the Olympic Games in the late 19th century. Inspired by the ancient games, but also motivated by a desire to promote international peace and cooperation, Coubertin founded the International Olympic Committee in 1894. The first modern Olympic Games were held in Athens, Greece in 1896, symbolically linking the new games to their ancient heritage. Now, since their revival, the Olympic Games have evolved significantly in scale, scope, and significance. The early modern Olympics were relatively small with a limited number of sports and participants, and over the years the Games expanded to include athletes from around the world, embracing a wide variety of sports and disciplines. Yeah, like breakdancing. Hey, I like breakdancing, but I don't think it's a sport. So the Olympic movement faced a lot of challenges throughout the 20th century, of course. Issues related to whether or not amateurs could participate or whether or not professionals should participate in Olympic Games. Many countries did it anyway, like particularly between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Soviets and other nations regularly sent professional athletes or athletes that were groomed for life to compete in a specific sport in the Olympics. Throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, before the United States began sending professional athletes to the Games, major sports like hockey and basketball were massive events, carrying great symbolism, national pride, and really a level of competition that bordered on war itself. For example, in 1980 at the Lake Placid, the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York, the U.S. hockey team, made up of amateur and collegiate players. At this time, the United States did not send professionals to the Olympics. So a bunch of amateurs, collegiate players, faced off against the Soviet team, which was made up of experienced, grizzled professionals who had dominated international hockey for decades. But on February 22nd, 1980, the underdog Americans beat the Russians 4-3 in what truly qualifies as an epic clash. As the game clock expired, I think I have to. Yeah, sorry about that picture again. We'll get that out of here now. Let's see if I can find a clip of Al Michaels. Do you believe in miracles? Yeah, here we go. Maybe this will work.
Skating in on the left side.
It was a big deal. Because you got to think of what's happening at this time in history. Well, first of all, the U.S. team. This wasn't the gold medal game. This was to get to the gold medal game. So the U.S. ended up winning the gold medal and winning the next game, beating Finland. But this is one of the most important moments of the 1980s, the Miracle on Ice, because it came at the height of what we know as the Cold War, a time when the threat of nuclear annihilation beset all of us every day, those of us who were in the world at that time. It was something that we thought about a lot. And so this victory over the mighty Russian bear boosted American morale and national pride, much like the soldiers who triumphed in war. The U.S. hockey team, led by Mike Ruzioni, came. Well, they were home, but they were treated to a hero's welcome back in their hometowns, much like the Olympic athletes from the ancient games. Now, let's see. 8 years later, in 1988, the United States began sending professional athletes to the Olympic Games. But it wasn't until 1992 when the real change happened. That's when the International Olympic Committee announced that for the first time it would allow NBA players, right? Professionals from other countries had been playing in the Olympics all along, but the NBA is a little different than all that. It's a little higher. Yeah, I know what Magic's doing there with his hand. I get it. I know what everybody's thinking. I see 1, 2, 3. Well, in 1992, in the Barcelona Summer Games, what came to be known as the Dream Team was formed. Probably the single greatest and most dominant sports team ever assembled. Here you see Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, David Robinson, plenty of others we don't need to name here. I could easily go down that rabbit hole, but I don't want to. I mean, I shouldn't. I do want to. I shouldn't right now. Maybe sometime, some other time. But it was a lot of fun to see that, right? No one had ever. It was amazing to watch. They went undefeated, 8-0 in the Barcelona games. They dominated the best the world had to offer by an average margin of victory of 44 points per game. And so the 1992 games came on the heels. The reason this is important is because think of where we are in history. The 92 games came on the heels of Operation Desert Storm, 1991, when the United States military had dominated Iraq in similar fashion. Like the Dream Team, the newly unveiled stealth bomber, went undefeated, sending Saddam Hussein back to his underground lair, tail tucked. And at the same time, Iraq's feared Republican Guard and the Fedayeen Saddam, which was his personal army, laid down their weapons in the desert and surrendered. So this period, though, you think about it, this period in the early to mid-1990s was probably the last time the United States has been seen that way, has been respected and honored in the world. And you see, you think back to 1980, to the Miracle on Ice. We were a big underdog, right? We weren't expected to win that. So there's this, everyone loves an underdog, right? But when you've been the big monkey on the block for many years now, people grow skeptical of you, get a little tired of you. And the U.S. has behaved atrociously over the last several decades. Well, over the 20th century, boycotts, geopolitical conflicts often marred the games for instance, in 1936, the Berlin Olympics, notably used as a propaganda tool by the Nazis. And, of course, the Cold War era, which we just saw in 1980. But after that, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union caused the U.S. to boycott the 1980 Summer Games in Moscow. And in return, the Soviet Union boycotted the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles. So you can see there's a very definite relation here to enemies of war, enemies that might be opponents, opposition. How they face off also in these other ways, and they use this as a platform for making statements. Significant social statements are also made at the Olympics. For example, here, the black Power Salute by Tommy Smith and John Carlos at the 1968 Mexico Olympics. Also, back in 1992, or again in 1992 at the Barcelona Summer Games, South Africa was participating for the first time since the end of apartheid. So the Olympics have been used as a way to mark historical events. They've been used as propaganda platforms. But in the 21st century, the Olympic Games have evolved to be really a symbolic event where technology is used to promote the spirit of the age and the direction. Let's see, I've got another. Yeah, here you go. Look at that. There's, I think that's from 2012 again. So you can usually see in the ceremonies of the Olympics the direction, the few, what we could call the elites if we wanted to, and we do because that's, you understand what I'm talking about when I say the elites. You could generally see, people say that there's a concept where as long as someone warns you of what they're about to do to you, if they're going to take advantage of you, right? A sort of a karmic power. There was also an ancient Roman or Greek saying that let he who will be deceived be deceived. And so many believe that there's programming in the ceremonies, in the opening ceremonies, the closing ceremonies, even in the logos. And you can notice on the thumbnail of this video, there's a logo of the Paris Games, and that, I guess I have to, let me just show you. Logo for 2024. Right there. See that? That's supposed to represent 24, right? But that's the astronomical symbol for Jupiter. I guess I need to prove that, don't I? Not astronomical, astrological. Yeah, right here. See there? No different. Same thing. Now that's not a big deal by itself, but interesting choice, wouldn't you say? The Sydney Games in 2000 were praised for their environmental efforts also. While the London Games in 2012 showcased advancements in digital broadcasting, social media engagement, and of course predictive programming. And of course we get to 2020 where the Tokyo Olympics were delayed a full year due to the pandemic. All right. So let's get on now to Paris. What is the deal here? The Paris Games also, of course, are aiming to further these trends, emphasizing sustainability and inclusivity, except for the fact that transgender athletes who have not fully transitioned before the age of 12 cannot participate. There are not going to be many of those because it's a relatively new phenomenon. So from their origins in ancient Greece to their modern version, the games have become more than anything else a global stage for trying out new surveillance technologies, predictive programming, mockery of the people of the world through ceremonies like some of those we've just seen. So mocking tones, probably you could even say downright evil imagery, right? There was some evil imagery in this. it gets to this part. Like really, what in the world is this? How can this be? Right? Look at the girl, the little girl. How could this be considered uplifting and light? What's this got to do with the games? All the hospital beds, just the weirdest thing. And then this weird thing here. What in the world? Does it make any sense to you other than an obvious ritual? That was then, 8 years later, completed, brought to fruition. Like lemmings, folks in London clapping at 7 p.m. in the evening for their healthcare workers, which was predictively depicted in 2012. So strange. What should we expect in the Paris Games this year? What is the true spirit of the games? Is it the spirit of competition and fair play? Is it celebrating our collective love for sports and pageantry? Or is it nothing more than the spirit of the age on display? Is it, in fact, laden with rituals that have some specific intent, as we seem to have seen from London 2012? Well, here's what's going on so far. Paris has decided to do without air conditioning in the athletes' rooms this year, right? And that is to satisfy the globalist crazies who have this desire to host the greenest ever Olympic Games. This is one of the rooms that the athletes would be staying in. It seems to me that anything that indicates prosperity, anything that represents the fruits of normal modern living, like automobiles, air conditioning, whiteness and Christianity, America, whatever, anything that represents prosperity, all of that is boiling oceans. You are boiling oceans. Anything that makes life easier or better is in their crosshairs, and the evidence for it is absent. Athletes at the highest level, or athletes at any level for that matter, cannot compete at that level if they cannot sleep, if they can't rest and recover. In fact, it's very important to remember that in the Olympic Games, most of the events are at night. So the athletes have to sleep during the day, the hottest part of the day. Jan Krasinski, who is managing the buildings and infrastructure for the Paris Games, said, quote, "We designed these buildings so that they would be comfortable places to live in the summer, in 2024 and later on, and we don't need air conditioning in these buildings." So he says, because we oriented the facade so that they wouldn't get too much sun during the summer. We're also providing naturally cool water that we're getting from underground to cool the air of these apartments. So you will not need air conditioning in the summer here, unquote. So he decided on your behalf, if you're one of the athletes, you don't need AC. What are you talking about? We know. Mayor of Paris, who's on the thumbnail. I think I've got a picture of the mayor here somewhere. I should. It would make sense if I did. Yeah, there's a boycott Paris. Let's see. and Hidalgo. She's on the thumbnail also. This is Anne Hidalgo, so you'll know who she is. She's going to be in the news a lot very soon. There she is. This is the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. And she has assured the Olympians and all the nations coming, she said, all will be well, don't worry. Just so happens last year in 2023, Paris experienced its 4th hottest summer on record. They had 4 heat waves, temperatures into the high 90s, high humidity, and which is not, that's uncomfortable, right? If you live where we do and even further south here, Georgia, you know, hot Atlanta, they call it that for a reason, isn't that right? Summer. It's hot Atlanta. Because it's hot and humid. It gets uncomfortable in the summer. But Mayor Hidalgo said it's going to be okay. She abated everyone's fears when she urged those worried about the heat to trust the science. Right? Of course, she actually said that. Now, Hidalgo is a blatant socialist. And let's be honest, there are no socialists. It's just a matter of degree. She's a communist, right? And like her idol, Vladimir Lenin, in the Soviet Union, she has implemented a massive green initiative to save the earth from humanity. Now, she's not saving it from climate change. She's saving the earth from you, from all of us who enjoy air conditioning. Here's the question. Who will save Paris from Hidalgo? Now, the mayor's stated goal is to ensure that the Paris Olympics have half the carbon footprint of the London Games in 2012 and the Rio Games in 2016. Hidalgo said, quote, I think we have to trust what scientists are telling us about the fact that we are on the brink of a precipice. I guess by that she means that we're really close. You know, they were saying that 40 years ago. She said, quote, everyone, including the athletes, must be aware of this. Right? You have to make everyone afraid. Let's just translate that. Everyone, including the athletes, must be aware that we're on the precipice. What that means is we must make everyone afraid. And we have to trust the scientists who, when they help us to construct buildings in a sober way that allows us to make do without air conditioning. I think it's great, right? You could build a place that doesn't need air conditioning and you find ways around that, but this is a different scenario, right? Well, you know, let's just give it the benefit of the doubt. Fair enough. What is this science you're talking about? Let's debate that science, but that'll never happen. In fact, none of the methods for cooling the rooms that they're talking about here, none of them are proven. It's all experimental. And none of the athletes have ever had an opportunity to compete under these conditions. And as with all things climate change alarmism, it's all theory and conjecture, smoke and mirrors. There's no there. The actual science says that, you know, to cool a room down, the air it must be dehumidified. You need to pull all the moisture out of the air. Then you can cool the air down. Just pulling the moisture out of the air does wonders for making it more comfortable. But then you can use systems to cool the air and recirculate it back in to cool a room effectively. This is accomplished with something called an evaporator, right? It's common to all AC units. Their theory of circulating water, misting it into the air in some cases, but this idea of circulating more water, blowing around the warm air, warm moist air, will only increase the humidity. And it'll make conditions inside the rooms even more miserable for athletes. It's a wonder. You would think, all right, they're talking about the science always, but they don't seem to understand science. They don't seem to understand reality. Of course, it's really not about that, as we know. It's about control. It's about fundamentally changing the way everyone lives. Now, the officials have said that with the right habits, such as closing shades during the day, right? So behavior modification. They say that temperatures inside the dorms will not exceed 79 degrees Fahrenheit. How about that? How thoughtful. How many of you like to sleep in 79 degrees with full humidity? Oh, by the way, most of the contests, again, just so you know this, most of the games are at night. The athletes will be competing at night. So, to try to sleep during the day. But anyway, the mayor says it's all good. All is well because science. Of course, the nations who are sending their athletes to Paris, who are serious about protecting their athletes, who are serious about giving them every chance to succeed, are not going to go along with this ridiculous little charade. And so, nations are sending AC units to Paris with their teams. For example, the Australian Olympic Committee is sending $100,000 worth of air conditioners. I would say at least $100,000 worth. It would probably have to be more than that. To France. CEO of the Australian Olympic Committee, Matt Carroll, said, "Look, we appreciate the mayor's effort, but this is a high-performance, world-class sporting event. We're not going for a picnic," he said. He went on to say, "As we've explained to the Paris Organizing Committee, athletes have got to sleep during the day because their events are at night," unquote. Well, the science tells us that it's hottest during the daytime. And so as Matt Carroll said, we will be bringing air conditioners and also fans for our athletes. Olympic teams from Canada, Greece, and Ireland are also going to be bringing portable AC units to Paris. But here's the most fascinating piece of, I think anyway, probably the most telling bit to this story here. In an outstanding move of climate consciousness, the Paris Organizing Committee is now offering portable air conditioning units for rent to the teams. And so there you have it. There you have it. When the socialists, when the communists show their true capitalist hearts, it's adorable, isn't it? James Murphy, writing for The New American, has the best idea for reducing Paris's carbon footprint. He says, if it's so important to the mayor and Hidalgo, if it's so important to her, to have the greenest, to have the least effect on the environment that the Olympics has ever had, well, if it's so important to her, why not just simply cancel the Olympics? Cancel the Olympic Games. Put your money where your mouth is. Really stand up for the environment. Stand up for Greta. Stand up for the boiling oceans and cancel the games. I agree with Murphy. If Mayor Hidalgo wants to make a statement that will stop the oceans from boiling, that will stop the hearts of the far-right extremists and make Greta smile, be the first city to cancel the games in the name of saving the planet. Murphy writes, after all, athletes from over 200 nations come to compete in the Olympics. Isn't that a lot of unnecessary jet travel? Remember, France has already banned short-haul flights for its own citizens for the sake of the climate. The Olympics are not a necessity. So, why not make a grand gesture in the name of the climate and cancel the games altogether? Now, we heard a minute ago that she said we've got to make everyone including the athletes, aware of this. Let's take a look. Let's help you be aware of what's going on in Paris. How is the mayor doing? Well, this is what Paris looks like. I don't know what this video is, but I'll try to play it.
There are just rats all over Paris.
Rats.
Look at them.
Rats.
Look at, oh, they're scurrying together. Oh my God, there's one over there scurrying around.
Ratatouille. I don't think they're cute.
Some people video squirrels. We video
yeah, we got lots of squirrels, but we don't see very many rats. So this was, I mean, they're all over the.
This is back in 2021. Let's jump up here because the city has also been overrun by immigrants, migrants, illegals. Big problems there. And so there's also a movement to boycott the 2024 games. But just for a moment to talk to you just for a second about fear. Fear porn when it comes to, let's see here. Yeah, there we go. When it comes to the climate. From a CNN report, Sunday, July 24th, 2022, former Vice President Al Gore likened climate crisis deniers to the police officers in Uvalde who failed to take action as 21 school children and teachers lives were ended in their classrooms, saying, quote, Al Gore said, they heard the screams, they heard the gunshots, and nobody stepped forward. Gore went on to say, the climate deniers are really in some ways similar to all of those almost 400 law enforcement officers in Uvalde, Texas, who were waiting outside an unlocked door while children were being hurt inside. Gore told NBC's Meet the Press, quote, they heard the screams, they heard the shots, and nobody stepped forward. Such individuals are deniers, cowards, and guilty of something akin to aiding and abetting mass killing. So this kind of messaging, and what you'll hear probably throughout the Olympics because of where it is and who's responsible for it, you'll hear a message, a comprehensive, compulsory indoctrination program being employed via all popular communications mediums in from every bit of coverage, because we already hear it. It's being, as Brian Sussman, author of Climate Cult, says, it's ubiquitous in our schools now. Every school in the developed world is inundated with this propaganda. It doesn't matter how many predictions of doom fail to manifest, the false prophets spouting these lies are never held accountable. Psychologists refer to these methods of coercion as fear appeals, unprecedented pressures being placed on the masses to dogmatically believe that humanity is on the brink because of lifestyle choices dependent on energy derived from fossil fuels. Carbon dioxide, once taught in schools to be life's essential ally, is now the enemy. There's a clip. Summer has she has reminded me for weeks now to grab this clip, and I should have done it. So she was right. You were right. So let me try to find this here. I want to find Breaking Bad, where Walter is teaching and he talks about carbon. I'll try one search. See if I can. Yeah, here it is. Listen to this. It's everywhere, right? The truth is there, and it's anyway.
Monoalkenes, diolefins, trienes, polyenes. I mean, the nomenclature alone is enough to make your head spin. But when you start to feel overwhelmed, and you will, just keep in mind that one element, carbon. Carbon is at the center of it all. There is no life without carbon.
Say what?
Carbon. Carbon is at the center of it all. There is no life without carbon. Nowhere that we know of in the universe. Everything that lives, lived, will live, carbon. Carmen is carbon. Sorry, is this in principle, Carmen? Did you, no, okay. I like to think that the diamond.
So there, that's carbon. It's at the center of it all. You might find it interesting to know that Friedrich Engels, Karl Marx's partner in crime, his research, his writing partner, in The Dialectics of Nature, the introduction to the book Dialectics of Nature from 1883, Engels wrote on climate. He said, "The time will come when the declining warmth of the sun will no longer suffice to melt the ice thrusting itself forward from the poles, when the human race crowding more and more about the equator will finally no longer find even there enough heat for life. The last trace of organic life will vanish. An extinct frozen globe, like the moon, will circle in deepest darkest and in an ever narrower orbit around the equally extinct sun, and at last fall into it. Fear, fear, and fear." If you're not aware, in the 70s, the great fear was an ice age. And the evidence is there. Ice age panic. Now, in Sussman's book, he describes the cycles of weather, and specifically what we've seen here in the United States. He has a whole chapter called "The Designer Pollutant," where he also talks about how the temperature is recorded around the United States, around the world, and how it is so tenuous. It's just there's really no good way to chart the temperature of the Earth very accurately. Human error, just all kinds of problems. It is not an exact science at all. In 1972, the National Science Board, the governing body of the National Science Foundation, observed, "Judging from the record of past interglacial ages, the present time of high temperatures should be drawing to an end," leading into the next glacial age. February 1974, as for the present cooling trend, a number of leading climatologists have concluded that it is very bad news indeed. The ice age is coming. He's got one after another. But Engels, Marx, we told you in the last show about how you can go back to Vladimir Lenin, the green movement. Vladimir Lenin had his own green movement that caused millions of deaths. So we'll come back to Sussman later. He says, though, in this chapter, if the cause of global warming actually is the emission of CO2 into the atmosphere by way of fossil fuels, then you should see a rise in CO2 before that rise in temperature. But the science doesn't show such a thing. In fact, when we do see rises in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from volcanic eruptions and things like that, interestingly, we don't see the planet warming, because God is good. Here's Stephen Koonin. Just to show this is not a bipartisan issue. They'll try to tell you it is. Stephen Koonin worked in the Obama administration. Let's see. He was the Undersecretary of Science at the Department of Energy in the Obama administration. Here's one thing he has to say in this extended interview with the Hoover Institution.
Where? So the next step is nobody who isn't deeply in the field is going to read all that stuff. All right. So there is a formal process to create a summary for policy makers, which is initially drafted by the governments, not by the scientists.
Wait a minute, 109 representatives of 195?
Well, it's not, of course, all of them don't participate. In fact, all the scientists who are listed don't participate in everything. There's some subcommittee, right, that is meant to...
I thought it was about the science, but it's not, is it? It's about the government. It's a good interview. Let me see if I can play another clip here.
Doctorate in physics at MIT. During a career in which he published more than 200 peer-reviewed scientific papers and a textbook on computational physics, Dr. Koonin rose to become provost of Caltech. In 2009, President Obama appointed him Undersecretary of Science at the Department of Energy, a position Dr. Koonin held for some 2.5 years, during which he found himself shocked by the misuse of climate science in politics and the press. In 2021, Dr. Koonin published Unsettled: What Climate Science Tells Us, What It Doesn't, and Why It Matters. Steve Koonin, welcome.
Wonderful to be talking with you, Peter.
The shaken secretary. In Unsettled, you write of a 2014 workshop for the American Physical Society, which means it's you and a bunch of other people who I cannot even begin to follow, serious professional scientists, in which you and several colleagues were asked to subject current climate science to a stress test, to push it, to prod it, to test it, to see how good it was. From Unsettled, I'm quoting you now, Steve. I'm a scientist. I work to understand the world through measurements and observations. I came away from the workshop not only surprised, but shaken by the realization that climate science was far less mature than I had supposed. Close.
And so that's what happens when people go look at the science. No, when they actually do science. By the way, I want to let you know that I've put in the description here a link to Alex Epstein's website, where you've got this section called Every Net Zero by 2050 Myth Refuted. Right? And he just goes down one by one. So this is a very good way to answer the critics, to engage with the mob who wants to shut you down, because these claims are backed by science. So many of their claims are not. What you find out when you look at the evidence and the facts is that the answer to whatever global issue or problem or potential catastrophe that we might be facing would be more fossil fuels, not less. And the fact is that over the last 100 years, let's see if I can find this stat here. The point being that there, over the last 100 years, deaths as a result of climate catastrophes have dropped off immensely. I don't have the statistic right here, but I wish I did. I wish I'd thought about this beforehand. But go here and check this out. You'll find everything you need to refute. You know, you're not a climate denier. You're someone who appreciates science, and you're someone who loves the truth. The fact is, though, the secularization and the de-Christianization of America, of the West altogether, has been happening for several centuries now. Things like we see in the Olympic Games things that we see. Oh boy. Bear with me for a second. It looks like yeah, hang with me just 1 second. I've apparently lost my camera again. I think the camera's overheating, so that's because I'm overheating. Sorry about that, folks. Hang in there for a minute. There we go. Whew. Close shave. So I guess I better hurry up and get out of here before something shuts down. The secularization and de-Christianization of America and the West, this has been happening to us for several centuries now. But these things take a while before they filter down to the people in everyday culture. And now we can feel this impact of modernism that the Enlightenment and related intellectual movements have really caused. Bill Mullenberger, and thanks to Summer for sharing this piece with me here. This is a great way to end the show here. By the way, Summer will be back with us in our next show. Hey, say, gotta take a day off every now and then. It's summer here. Summer needs a break when it comes to summer. And so, of course, we wish she was here with us, and we miss her very much. And by we, I mean me and all of you. So we'll see Summer again next time. Bill Mullenberger writes, there's a new book by American evangelical writer Aaron Wrenn who looks at these themes. And it's called Life in the Negative World. There it is. He looks at 3 periods. The positive world, 1964 to 1994. Positive meaning that's when the world was more positive. Generally, 51% of the people were positive toward Christianity. From 1964 to 1994, a 30-year period. And then a period from 1994 to 2014 when the world seemed to be neutral to Christianity. And from 2014 to the present, the negative world. A time when it seems the world is not just indifferent to Christianity. As Jim Osmond said on a show the other day, the world is anti-Christian. Mullenberger says you can quibble about the dating, but these 3 periods correspond to what he's mentioned in his writing before, that a generally pro-Christian world, a world somewhat indifferent to the faith, and a period which is mainly hostile to it. 3 periods. He says of the present period, quote, for the first time in the history of our country, Orthodox Christianity is viewed negatively by secular society, especially by the elites, by these people like Mayer and Hidalgo. The whole point then is to ask ourselves, how do we do mission work? How do we fulfill the Great Commission? How do we represent God in such a changed and changing situation? How can we be salt and light in this? How do we stay true to our Lord in this increasingly hostile environment? Well, we certainly do not change the message, but we might need to change the method and the means of presenting the unchanging message to a changing culture. Let's see here. Wrenn writes in his book, in today's world, evangelicals aren't a majority either by themselves or as part of a larger Christian group. We don't run society's major institutions anymore, and sometimes we barely have a seat at the table in them. Our core values are now in disfavor. In a negative world where the institutions of culture see Christian identity and beliefs as negative status markers, the old model of thinking and acting like a majority needs to be jettisoned, right? In other words, we can no longer justify acting like the culture. We have to be different. Evangelicals need to learn to act like a minority and spend more time and effort focused on sustaining their own communities and beliefs. So let me rephrase what he's saying here, which is a message that Summer and myself are really intent on repeating to you over and over. It's become a core, aside from the gospel, has become one of the core messages we want you to hear. You need to be focused, first of all, on your own household. Right? The biblical perspective on charity and doing good works is start in your home. Your own family comes first. But your local government, you have to be aware of what's happening in your own hometown. You should at least know more about your own local government than you know about what's happening in Washington, D.C., because your local government affects you immediately. Seeing it all crumbling right before our eyes is quite painful for many of us, but God is always at work, and we can always count on our unchanging God and His unchanging eternal message to continue to act in our changing world. Back in 1969, Francis Schaeffer wrote in his book, Death in the City, quote, do not take this lightly. It's a horrible thing for a man like myself, Schaeffer, speaking of himself. It's a horrible thing to look back and see my country and my culture go down the drain in my own lifetime. It's a horrible thing that 40 years ago you could move across this country and almost everyone, even non-Christians, would have known what the gospel is, basically. A horrible thing that 30 to 40 years ago our culture was built on the Christian consensus, and now we are an absolute minority. That was 1969, okay? And Schaeffer was fully aware of this shift even then, and he demonstrated the right attitude toward it. What is that attitude? Well, first of all, we wonder, sometimes we fear and worry and we're anxious because we wonder, why does God allow such things to happen? So here's the message that I want to make sure you take away from this today. The Bible says that these things that are happening around us now, whatever they are always working for the good of His people. Now, because we do not share God's perspective, it's very difficult for us to see the truth in that. And until we do share God's perspective, these trials, this training will continue. Because that's the point of trials. Not that we would merely endure the trial, but that we would resist the temptations to fall into sins of worry and doubt. And that our response to these trials and temptations would be faithful responses. And learning to respond faithfully to trials, that is what grows us spiritually. People talk all the time about wanting to grow spiritually. How do we grow spiritually? How do we fight? How do we win a spiritual war? Learning to respond faithfully to trials. That's what grows us spiritually. That's what wins the spiritual war. Because that is what forms us progressively into the image of Christ. That's sanctification. Okay, so what do we do? Well, right now, God, things seem messed up. It seems like the wicked are winning. It seems like darkness is prevailing. But I'll guarantee you that is not the case. God is revealing to us now the depths and darkness of human depravity. And believe it or not, that is for our good. It's good for us. We've had it so good for so long that we often feel like if we just keep our heads down and wait it out, things will return to normal soon. We can't live that way anymore. Right now, God is calling his people to repentance and obedience, and we can no longer ignore the clear commands of Scripture. Because that is our firm foundation. That is our only viable weapon in this war. Let me be more specific. Prayer, the Scriptures, and then exposing darkness, lighting the path for those who would come with us. So, what things we can do? One thing we can always do is openly and intently live and speak biblical truth. Now, you see, the truth movement gets this one wrong almost universally. Now, it's good to speak the truth. They get that much of it right. But that's not enough. You have to live the truth. How do you live the truth, right? We don't want to just speak in platitudes. How do we actually live the truth? What do I do? If you desire God's blessing for your life, and if we desire God's blessing for our nation, then you must engage the culture. You have to engage the government. Engage it. You'll not find anywhere in Scripture that tells you not to engage it for the kingdom. So we can't be soft on sin. We have to call evil evil. When someone is a man and he's pretending to be a woman, we have to call that person a man, regardless of what repercussions or consequences it may bring. And we have to cease compromising on the gospel and what God has called us to do. Because God has called no man, none, not even one, to be a spectator. So this is a hard fact about God's word and his will. God is going to use you. There's no doubt about it. God is going to use you. He's either going to use you in your faithful trust and obedience, or he's going to use you in your disobedience. But God will use you one way or the other. How do we restore our nation? That seems to be a big topic these days. We restore the nation, as we said first, spiritually. We fortify ourselves spiritually by speaking and living the truth. Where do we find that? You find that in the Scriptures. But then, strengthening our families and our local churches. What's more important than the presidential election? What's more important than the Biden-Trump debate coming up is engaging with and strengthening our local governments, our local churches. Because God's given us the design. He's given us the plan. We already have the answer, the blueprint right in front of us. And so now is the time to leave behind the bickering and the apathy, and let's work together as Christ's hands and feet in the world. Build back better. No. Build back righteous leadership. One family, one church, one local government at a time. We're not security guards called to merely observe and report. We are the king's men. We're God's army. We're Christ's soldiers in the world. And we're called to action, not apathy. James 4:17 says, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, to him it is sin. Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. How do we expose them? Christians are expected to be upstanding citizens. That includes acting against injustice. That includes correcting oppression, true oppression when we see it. It includes calling evil evil and good good. Micah 6:8 says, he has shown you, O mortal man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. Isaiah 1:17 says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless. Seems like you have to do some judging there. Yeah, you do. You have to make judgments. Isaiah 1:17 ends saying, plead the widow's cause. Parable of the Good Samaritan also emphasizes the importance of taking action to help those in need. Jesus here teaches about loving one's neighbor through the actions of the Samaritan, who did not ignore the man beaten by robbers, unlike the priest and the Levite did. All right, bear with me for 1 second. I've got to, there, that'll be a little better to look at. And so here we've identified the root of our national crisis and the major reason why America is on the precipice. You know, the mayor said earlier, we heard her say that we need to have everybody know that we're on the precipice. We're on the brink of something big. Well, it's not exactly what she thinks it is. The root of our national crisis, the major reason we're on the precipice of collapse today, is because of idle Christians. Those of us who are not following through faithfully. We're not responding to trials faithfully. Local government is where the takeover of private property and water rights is happening now, not in Geneva, Switzerland, not in Washington, D.C. The policies of the New World Order, Agenda 21, 2030, the green policies, carbon taxes, fees, fines, etc., are being implemented by your neighbors and your local government right now. How did it happen that a man could win the Miss Maryland pageant? How did it happen? How did this oddity celebrated by the government, transgenderism, how did this oddity, it's celebrated by the government and a lot of Americans, how did that happen? Apathy and idle Christians waiting it out, thinking it'll all pass if we just wait on Jesus. How did Drag Queen Story Hour, a crazy social policy that advocates and protects predators dressed as female strippers who maintain a presence in our schools? How did that happen? It happened because your basic freedoms are being limited and trampled upon directly by your own neighbors who hold positions in your local government. So stop blaming Joe Biden. Yes, he needs to go. He is a problem, but you have a more immediate threat. You can't fix Joe Biden, but you can definitely have a major influence on your local government, in your own home, in your local church. The globalist agenda is being directly implemented in your life, not by the WEF, the WHO, or the UN. It's being implemented in your life directly by your neighbors who hold elected or appointed positions in your local government. Those who are being persuaded, promoted, and bought and enriched to establish the policies that will eventually end your religious freedom, that will eventually hinder the spreading of the gospel. Who is it that secures your rights and keeps your city parks and public resources from being invaded and depleted by federal or United Nations funded operations? If you said it's my local government, you get a C+ for paying a little attention. But you're still wrong. The responsibility is yours. It's you. We hold the power to change the course of our nation because we are the nation. So as Christians, our obligation to society is clearly commanded in God's word. First, we care for, provide for, and minister to our own families, and then our local church family, and then our neighbors, 1 Timothy 5:8. And then after that, if everyone is taken care of as you can, as you have opportunity, then you can take care of the migrants or whoever else happens to be there. So we have to do all we can to be at peace with everyone, rejecting any urge or movement that demonstrates a spirit of revenge or exalts any candidate to savior status, as we definitely see happening on both sides of the aisle now. We have to cling to that which is good and overcome evil with good, by doing good, by speaking truth and living truth. Romans 12, 9 through 21. Job 22:21 says, yield now and be at peace with the Lord. Thereby good will come to you. That's the word of God. I don't know how to make it any clearer. Yield now and be at peace with the Lord, and good will come to you. I don't know. Do we really want it? Most of our leadership at the federal level is simply misguided. They're just inundated with evil, and they're ignorant of God's grace. However, by God's grace, we're not yet actually being oppressed. Not in the way, I know we are being oppressed in certain ways. Lawfare, for example. But we still have ways to fight back. So far, we've only been tested. And praise God, we still have a functional republic. We still have it. It might be bent, but it's not yet broken. How do we get here? It's the slow process of barely perceptible incremental changes over decades. We've been lulled asleep into a kind of complacency. This is the danger Ben Franklin and Alexis de Tocqueville warned of. Americans have bought into the mythology of America. They bought into it so deeply that now we can't imagine that we would fall. We've allowed an entity that not only ignores the law of God, but actively works against it. A globalist, one-world ecumenical movement that seeks to fully franchise all human life and the earth itself into a central governance, a benevolent despotism where even the smallest decisions and allowances are meted out by the new God, which is the state, the system, the government God. So where is the hope? Horace Greeley, founder of the New York Tribune, back in the 1800s, said, it's impossible to enslave mentally or socially a Bible-reading people. The principles of the Bible are the groundwork of human freedom. Patrick Henry, the Bible is worth more than all other books which have ever been printed. William Henry Seward, Secretary of State from 1861 to 1869 during the Civil War, said, the whole hope of human progress is suspended on the ever-growing influence of the Bible. Napoleon said, the Bible is no mere book, but a living creature that conquers all who oppose it. Military machines protect against outside invaders. God's gift of liberty in America is contingent upon your faithful stewardship of it. Mothers, fathers, teachers, and local governments. That's who protects freedom. Fighting for freedom and the gospel today doesn't mean withdrawing to your homestead where you'll never be seen or heard from, and just allowing the world to crumble around you, leaving the world behind. Fighting for freedom and the gospel means engaging with respect and speaking and living truth, because we're in a national crisis. That's no longer debatable. If Christians serve God with their actions and humble themselves to fulfill the Great Commission in their own communities and local governments, then God will bless our efforts. Daniel 10:12 says, then the angel said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your prayers have been heard. And then the angel said, and I have come because of your words, because of your prayer. So Christians, pay close attention to your neighbors and your local governments and the civil magistrates and the officials who have a daily and direct impact on your ability to worship freely, to live peacefully. Let us make disciples of those very neighbors who might then themselves go forth into local and state government or higher positions of government and continue that message. We must be diligent and sober-minded because these are not qualities often cultivated when our minds are waterlogged from the daily quagmire of speculative propaganda. Nor will we find renewal from the daily huffing of the fumes of social media, the dumpster fire that it is. There's no peace there. Romans 12, 1 and 2. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship, which is your life. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Ultimately, the only way to win, the only way to prevail, is with the sword of the gospel. Repentance and forgiveness of sins through the shed blood and resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, is the answer. It's the same answer. Our leaders need a change of heart and a renewal of mind, and that can only be accomplished by God, but He'll do it through us. In fact, we all need renewal. We need revival. Fathers need renewal. Pastors need renewal. And Christians in America need renewal. So we need to pray for that renewal. We need to pray for revival. And then we need to trust that when we go forth into the breach in the name of Christ for that freedom, that the Lord will be with us because He's faithful and because we've responded faithfully to this trial. There's no complaining and whining. There's faithful response and obedience, and there's disobedience. There's two ways. One is right, one is wrong. Either way, God's going to use you. One might be more uncomfortable than the other. Christians, we are part of the culture. The culture is what we do with what God has made. That's culture. We are affected also by the culture around us. And we also can't separate or isolate ourselves from culture. God's called Christians to do many things, but the Great Commission, the calling to take the good news of Christ to our nation, to make disciples in our nation, in our hometowns, to herald the teaching of Christ in our own hometowns, to build up our culture into a Christian culture, that is our priority. Not to retreat into the hills, but to simply live out the life of a Christian, speaking and living truth, and through that we transform the culture and we win. We shut down this silliness. Christian, you have been entrusted with the gospel. Isaiah 52 says, shake yourselves from the dust and rise up and free yourself from the chains around your neck. Thus says the Lord, those who rule over you howl, and my name is continually blasphemed all day long. But how lovely on the mountains are the feet of those who proclaim the good news, who announce peace and proclaim the good news of good things, who announce salvation and say to God's people, your God reigns. Your watchmen lift up their voices. They shout joyfully together. Break forth, shout joyfully together, for the Lord has comforted and redeemed His people. Yahweh has bared His holy arm in the sight of all the nations, that all the ends of the earth may see the salvation of our God. Go therefore, for the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. He's in front, He's behind, He's with us. Matthew 28. The 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee to the mountain which Jesus had designated. And when they saw Him, they worshipped Him, but some doubted. And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to keep all that I commanded you. And the best news of all, behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. God bless you, my friends. We'll see you next time.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up, because bad idea now.
This This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.